Does this? What? What on earth just happened?
Red borders.
Wait, does that mean it's recorded? Here we go. Now it's started. Now I can leave that alone. Hopefully, red border means it's sharing. Seems like it just works. All right, ready? Okay. The Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Our Lady, Queen of Peace, pray for us. Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. All right. Spy Wednesday. It's a good day. I don't know if any of you are on the email blast that I send out, but that was my topic today. Spy Wednesday. Do you get it?
Yeah.
Do you get the news? Okay. You read it?
Parts of it.
Wow, there you go.
Where does spy come from? Is that like a?
Judas.
Oh, it's actually.
He's plotting. So the readings today are about him going and getting his 30 pieces of silver and looking for an opportunity to betray.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's actually like spy.
Spy Wednesday.
Okay.
Yeah, it's all happening. But it's confusing because yesterday seemed like Spy Tuesday to me because it was already talking about him doing that, but today was official. So it's kind of fitting, given the language of the course, fitting that we're doing this part today, which is the defects of nature assumed by Jesus, by the Son of God. Okay, so the second person of the Trinity assumed a full human nature, but then there's defects of that nature, and you're like, what? Oh, defected human nature. So we're going to talk about that. What does that mean? But it has to do with the reality of, say, Holy Week is going to demonstrate that he did actually take up some of these defects of nature because they are what allow him to suffer. So we're going to go into, was he just play acting? Was he really suffering? How could he suffer if he already had the beatific vision? And then how is the way he suffers different than the way that we suffer? That's what this is all about. So emotional life, all those things. Good? Right. So I was going to do something very holy here and I forgot what it was. That's right. I was going to go through the account of Gethsemane, but I didn't. But if we think about that, so if we think about Gethsemane, I'm going to write that in. Okay, so when he's in the garden, his soul is sorrowful, even unto death. Goes away, he prays, he throws himself on the ground, and then he sweat drops of blood. Okay, it's just an actual condition. You've heard about this before? What have you heard?
I just watched a video of a surgeon doing the whole breakdown of.
It's like a doctor on Calvary, that kind of book. Or?
Yeah, it was just like a YouTube video on this surgeon actually giving an account of the wounds and the actual physical sufferings that he went through, and that is actually a thing that you can sweat blood in immense stress.
Yeah, it's incredible. Yeah, like I mean, I've never sweat blood. Yeah, huge. So there's real suffering going on, and what I like about, what's helpful in this scene is that he's talking about his soul being sorrowful, and then we also have the physical reality playing out. So there's a suffering going on that's affecting his whole human nature, his soul and his body. Now, if you think about it, if you think about the creation of Adam and Eve in the beginning, right? So there's certain gifts of nature at the beginning that we talk about after they fell. Then you have more pain in childbirth. You have like the nature sort of turns against you. You have to work by the sweat of your brow, and so in a sense, you see some of that suffering is a consequence of sin, of the punishment, of sin, and Jesus didn't sin. So we have this question of why is he suffering if he has this perfect, innocent human nature attached to, hypostatically united to the word. So it's a bit interesting. So just again, advertising on the left-hand side here. So I have here making assumptions, just being stupid, but yeah, what did he assume? This was from last week, but I found this helpful to just run back through of what sort of power Christ's soul had, like in relation to how it affects his body, right? So did he have omnipotence? Do you have omnipotence with his body, right? So, and in that question, which we covered last week when we talked about his will, we talked about how he assumed a passable body. When we say passable, that word comes from like this passion, which means to suffer, to, you know, you're on the receiving end of something. So our emotions, for example, another word for those is passions, because we suffer them, you know, something happens and it happens to us. We're on the receiving end. They react to stimuli. So Christ assumed a passable body. And what we'll talk about today is also a passable soul. You know, like he's affected by things. So anyway, that's why I put that there. And then the questions of the Summa that we're looking for are questions 14 and 15 from part 3. So what are the defects of body and what are the defects of soul? So there's things there. So that's what we got. And then extra, I just put this little excerpt this time from Pope Benedict XVI, where he talks about St. Gregory Nazianzen, early church father, who has this very famous quote about whatever is not assumed is not healed. And it's a very famous quote against the heretics, especially Apollinaris, saying, you know, he had to have a true full human nature otherwise, and he had a true human intellect, because if he didn't, then it's not redeemed. So whatever is not assumed is not redeemed. So that's my category, my collection of things for us. Good. All right, let's get rid of this. So what kind of nature did Christ assume? Hey, welcome. What kind of nature did Christ assume? Let me think about that. So is Jesus' human nature that he assumed exactly the same as ours?
Except sin.
Yep, no sin. Yes. Do you think of anything in us that maybe, though it's not sinful, would still not be fitting, would sort of somehow go against his dignity or his holiness? For someone who has perfect virtue, someone who has perfect knowledge, is it
Like we're sort of dying constantly.
we're dying constantly?
Yeah, like every day we come closer just by like getting older, whereas with Jesus, I don't think that was the case. Like he wasn't, like if he wasn't crucified, he wouldn't have died. Like he wouldn't have died naturally.
Do you think so?
Yeah, I don't think Jesus would have died a natural death.
Wow. Okay.
I mean, that's just like the
Yeah,
like
because he didn't,
yeah,
because he didn't sin.
yeah.
Yeah, right. Okay. So right, valid thought that he hasn't sinned. He doesn't have the stain of original sin in him. How did he die? Why did he die? Even if someone else would try to kill him, like, could he die? Clearly he died.
Yeah.
So what happened there? Because he doesn't deserve to die.
Yeah, because there's other sin involved. So like, that's like, because he received sin, if that makes sense.
Does it? It's complicated, right? Okay, so we've got the part of, hey, welcome. How could he die? Well, clearly he did. So that's what we're dealing with today. So he assumed the possibility of dying. He took it to himself, even though he didn't deserve it, because he never sinned and he didn't have an original sin. Right? But in his normal way of living, what are things that we're challenged by that would be really unfitting for him to be challenged by? Like, think about all your different faculties, your intellect, your will, your emotions. What is there about the way we operate that is not congruent with someone with perfect virtue? Concupiscence, right? So concupiscence is, any takers? I mean, we all have it. I mean, I'm not looking for a definition, but if we think about what does concupiscence do to us?
You have a tendency to sin, to
Yeah, you're inclined to sin in a way. And concupiscence talks a lot about our emotional life as well, right? So that sometimes they call it the Tinder of sin, which is really interesting how that app is called Tinder. Like, ooh, because it's a actually theological word. Yeah. It's like this fire, like the fire's ready to go. It's just on the edge. So that app is really just, burn it. Right? But the Tinder, the foams, sometimes they call it the foams of sin. We have this inclination to sin. That's it's a disorder. Okay, so it's easy for us to sin, especially get out of order. What about our intellect? Our intellect, how would that? We've talked about the three different parts of his human intellect, where his knowledge is coming from. But for Jesus to be the truth, okay, after original sin, our nature is wounded, right? So we have an ignorance. So that's not fitting. So you can't assume ignorance out of solidarity with us. I'm going to assume your ignorance so I can heal it. No, that's just dumb, right? So he didn't do that. Or the same in our will, we're supposed to be filled with charity, grace. So it wouldn't be fitting for Jesus to have malice in his will because he's perfect love himself. So he can't assume that. He doesn't really, his nature, he said, shouldn't die, you shouldn't be doing all these things, but he does. So we're going to see there's a category of things. There's some things he'll assume, even though they're not, he doesn't deserve them, but he'll assume them to redeem them. And there's other things that he won't assume because it would be a contradiction. Make sense? So we're going to look at these two categories. Okay, so what kind of nature did Christ assume? Knowing that what is not assumed is not healed. So he has to assume whatever we want to heal. So he assumed a passable nature, a nature that's capable of suffering. And there's that question, do you really suffer? Like if he's looking at, like if we think of the beatific vision, we're going to be in perfect bliss because we see God. Wouldn't the joy of that be so powerful that whatever he's suffering on the cross doesn't even matter to him? Okay, so Thomas is going to look at that. Normal questions. Okay. Why would he? Now we know that he assumed the passable human nature. So passable soul, there's things that he's affected by things in his soul, and he's affected by things in his body. Okay, he actually suffers. Nails really go through his hand, and it hurts. So what would be some reasons why he would do that? Thomas comes up with 3. We can see if we can come up with any, and then we'll check again, Thomas. Why would you do that?
To set an example.
Yeah, that's number 3. Yeah. Example of what?
Of what you get if you sort of live a virtuous life.
Yeah.
Like if you follow Christ.
Yeah. So example of virtue or whatever. Yeah. Okay. Any other thoughts? Redemptive? Yeah. Okay. So yes. Redemption. So let's put redemptive and then we'll see what how Thomas words it. I'm going to put us out of our ministry here right now. Oh no, we don't want this one. Okay, 3. He takes on, so 3 reasons. Takes on himself the punishment due to sin to satisfy, right? So that's number 1, redemptive. The last one you put to the perfect example, patient endurance. So he endures suffering. But the one in the middle is probably the one interesting. It helps us actually believe that he's really a man. So if he's on the cross, but he's not suffering anything, there's this, what's happening to me? Like, we would say, well, he's not really a man. Like, he's just play acting. It's just a facade. So it helps our belief. So they're the three answers that Thomas gives us. Okay, so so he takes on our punishment. And this is interesting. Not the sin itself. He takes on the punishment due to sin to redeem us. And second one was helps us believe it's true. Humanity. Okay. And then sample of virtue of patient endurance. Okay, so 3 reasons why you would even want to do that. As I said, given he wants to do it, let's think about what are the defects of our human nature? What are the things that are like, it's like they're bad. That word is a little challenging. You know, if we were perfectly, blissfully in heaven, we wouldn't have these things. What are the sorts of things that they're really only going on here while we're on earth in this sinful world? Sickness. Yep. Sure. Hunger. It's sort of proper to our nature.
Yeah.
Hunger, but like extreme hunger, you know, like
Yeah.
really die. It's a suffering. It's a type of suffering, isn't it?
Yeah.
Hunger, thirst. I don't know. I'm actually not 100% sure, but we'll throw them there. Okay, physical suffering, right? So it'd be great if we just walked around and it was like trampoline world and just like cartoons. Oh, I just got run over and get off. Physical suffering. What about like moral suffering in a way of sadness, you know, grief. Yeah, we suffer being rejection, all those sorts of the emotional interior things that we'd rather not endure, you know.
Ambition, you want?
Ambition.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Well, people are always like working to get like qualifications and jobs and stuff, but they don't really matter.
That's true. For us, I think it is a suffering and ambition. I was listening to a talk on this last night, actually. It was fantastic. It was talking about, talking about sloth, but part of it is this. What? Sloth? Sloth. Oh, it was a great talk. I'll give you the link. It's so good. But I think that is valid for us. Like we suffer those. Okay, but I think, okay, let's put here just for us. We have, oh yeah, death, one second. Moral suffering due to our own disordered intentions, will, etc. So like ambition and things like that. Yeah, we suffer from them, but it's because we're not really directed. We don't put the one thing necessary as our highest thing. We put getting all this stuff done, and then that's why we suffer. Where I don't think Jesus had like unrealistic ambitions for his life. He wasn't under the burden of somebody's expectations. But yeah, we do really suffer those things. They're consequences of our sin. But he wouldn't have that. Actually, that's really important because when it says he became sin, it's not that he suffered as if he had sinned. So he didn't enter into that. Some commentators will say that. I find that really confusing. I'm not of that mind. I don't, it's not in the classical theology. Like none of the fathers of the church are going to talk about Jesus thinking he sinned before the Father. They don't ever talk about that. Some modern scholars will, and I find that really confusing. But our suffering sometimes is on ourselves because we have sin. So we feel the abandoned. This is a very modern debate. The abandonment. We feel abandoned because we've sinned, because we've rejected God. We feel cut off because we are. He was never cut off from the so, but he could feel for us. Like he could enter into. He would understand our situation and have compassion for us. So that would cause you grief. It's like, okay, so if one of my family is in a really bad moral state, I suffer for them a lot because I can't turn them around. Like I can imagine the Lord in the Garden of Gethsemane, the grief of knowing all the sins of all the people all the time. The full weight of that and the full extent of what they've done and the depth of the malice in the middle of it, and how many of them will not receive mercy. Now that's a suffering. Like I just think of one of my relatives and it crushes me sometimes. I wish I could take on whatever it is to be able to turn it around. But it's not the same as me being in that moral situation. It might actually even be worse because I'm trying to. Cool. Anyway, sorry, long answer. Okay. Death. Yes. Yeah. Okay, let's leave that. What all emotional? Well, I guess that's moral, emotional. Maybe it's not moral suffering. Maybe I should put emotional suffering. Okay. Blah. Okay, let's do that. So we have these we call like defects. The things that might, so we have other ones, like we have ignorance, we have malice, and we have concupiscence. I don't never know how to spell it. Who knows? The ones that would detract from his knowledge and virtue, we already talked about, ignorance, malice, concupiscence. So he can't have those because it's not fitting for the way, the truth, and the life to be ignorant or lacking charity or unstable. Bad. So the criteria then, if you put it in the classic language, is he didn't assume detractable passions. Like, so he didn't assume those sorts of anything that would detract from his holiness. But he did assume things that were not that were like suffering, death. He didn't deserve. He took them to himself. He willingly took them to himself for those three reasons. How are we doing?
But what does it mean by what is not assumed is not
Healed.
healed?
So
If he doesn't assume these defects.
yeah, he doesn't heal them. He assumes intellect and heals it. He doesn't assume ignorance. So ignorance is, this is kind of a thing of, back to the question of what is evil. Evil is not something, it's a lack of something. Sorry.
It's a lack of goodness.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So it's something missing, not something, it's not a evil force. Someone this morning in mass, the poor priest, he doesn't, yeah, his language is a little bit sloppy, and he was sort of saying that we have these evil forces in us. I'm like, no, we don't. we actually really don't. And I am not in the force. No. Careful. So you have to be really careful with your language. So you can't assume a defect, like a lack. Okay, you can assume a possibility of suffering, but yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah.
So he assumed intellect, he assumed the will, and a full, real human will, human intellect, human passions, but not the disorder in them. Yeah. Good. All right. Okay, I love this. I'm only human. We say this a lot. Okay. When we say I'm only human, what do we mean? Like usually when people say, well, I'm only human, therefore
I'm not perfect.
I'm not perfect. Or
Make mistakes.
make mistakes.
Yeah.
And this is a really important thought for our spiritual life. It's not human. Sin is not what it means to be human. Okay, so is being human a reason for sin? Like, so we sometimes align that. I sin, I'm only human. Okay, you're human, but sin is not a defining part of your humanity. It's definitely not the beginning of your humanity. It's definitely not a defining characteristic. Okay, so sin is a distortion, a disorder of our humanity, a bad use of our humanity. It's not, and I think that's really important to just get straight. She's very cute. Okay, so 3 reasons why Jesus would not assume sin itself. Thomas comes up with 3. I don't remember. I'm going to look at the thing, but if there's anything that occurs to you.
If sin is the outcome of the lack of goodness, then Christ's goodness is.
Yeah, okay.
So,
Yes.
I don't know.
Let's put these in our head and then we'll go and we'll steal them from the other one. Okay, so yeah. So how could, yeah, it's a contradiction. You've got all holiness and sin. That seems to be contradicted.
Because Christ is God. So
Yeah,
like
yeah.
it sort of just makes sense.
Yeah. How does God turn his back on himself?
Yeah.
That's a really weird image. Yeah, spinning, like chasing your tail. How do you do that? Yes. And how could a sinful person redeem us? So we're going to be redeemed from sin. So it's not like by me sinning so that you don't sin. That doesn't work. Okay, so let's have a look here. Dun dun dun. Where's their sin? Where is it? Where's their sin in Christ? Here. Firstly, one who is in sin cannot redeem sinners. Okay, I said that. It in no way proves his manhood because sin is not natural to man. Okay, and one in sin cannot give the example of perfect virtue. Okay, well, yeah, sort of makes sense. So let's just pick this up and throw it there for the plebs for later. Okay, secondly, and thirdly, important. So yeah, Jesus did not actually. So when it says he became sin, he didn't become a sinner. Just the sins of the punishment due to sin was laid on him. And the understanding, the deep reality of what that sin is, the weight of it, was very evident to him in all of himself. Like he knows your condition when you're in the worst of your sin, and pile them all up together, and everyone's up together. He knows that weight, and he took the punishment for that. Okay, good, happy. Yes, he didn't actually become a sinner. That would be stupid. Okay, what are the forms of sin? We were talking about that. Concupiscence. There's an inclination to sin. Tinder is the other word, and it's in the catechism if you want to have a look at that later. There's a nice little definition of what is concupiscence. Okay, passions. I have this great picture of this kid. I was trying to find, this is actually from an article that says, why teenagers are involved in risk taking. Why do people do risk? So you did? Was it good? No. It was all right. Okay. So passions. These are things Jesus did take on. Okay. So he had emotions. He had an emotional life. But if we think of our own emotional life in us, passion, passio, like I am suffering something. So I don't know. There's a terrible smell, and I have an aversion, I have an emotional reaction, I have a physiological reaction, and I just want to run the other direction, okay? Or, yeah, we react to stimuli. But in our life, we can, because of concupiscence, our passions by nature are made to be led by reason, not as a strict authoritarian thing, but it's more like Aristotle would call it a political power. The reason is supposed to encourage your passions to align with the good. And actually, when we think about doing the good, for example, if you want to virtue, if you want to be, like, it's great that you're just, but if while you're doing something that is just, you're feeling the opposite, it's not as meritorious. So virtue is more profound when your emotions line up with it. Sometimes you'll see in some people who do moral theology will say, oh yeah, real love is when you're hating, but you just will good for the other, but you're all the while you're feeling this horrible thing toward them. No. I mean, still, yeah, do the good, don't kill them, right? Do the good. But that's not full virtue. Actually, over time, your emotions should align with the good. So they're supposed to support us in doing good. So if there's still, how people have this thing about you have to love everyone, but you don't have to like them. There's some truth in that. Like, our emotions aren't under our complete control. I can't say, feel happy now and make it happen. Okay, sometimes you just wake up and you feel awful. Well, what do you do with that? I don't know, in your normal life. Like, if you have an emotion, let's say you feel bad, it's like, bleh. Now, now your reason and your emotion are work together. Now, if I feel bad, and then I start adding reasons for why I feel bad, why I should feel bad, why, yeah, it's all bad. Keep giving more, feed it with reason. I am exploding that emotion. I'm turning it into something, and I'm going to get stuck there ages. Where if, on the other hand, I wake up and I feel blah, and then I do my morning offering, okay, I feel blah, and I give that to you today. May my blahness please you, and whatever. And then, okay, like, let me put my attention, like, I got to get out of myself. Let me put my attention to serving that dissipates, and I can actually end up feeling great later. Maybe I can't force it. I can't say feel great, but what I do with my reason and my will, what the choices that I make, will really impact the hold that emotion has over me. So we're not responsible for the initial reaction. They happen naturally, and sometimes our parents are responsible for the way they brought us up. Okay, so I don't know. There's you see, I don't know, a certain something, and you react way too strong because you've just been raised like that's bad or that's going to work. We're not responsible for their first reaction, but we are responsible for what we do about it afterwards. So sometimes our emotions can be disordered. So, for example, you might really like something that's morally really bad for you. I really have an emotional response to something that is morally wrong. Now, the initial stimuli, like, it's there, boom, I react. I'm not responsible for that, but I am responsible for it. Then pack it back to the right direction, turning. And usually it works better to just be gentle about it. Because if something comes and you strong reaction, and then you go, oh, and then you're strong and strong, and it just gets stronger. Where if you just think about, say, you've got a saucepan on the stove and it's boiling, take it off, just put it down. Much better to be gentle. But sometimes if you see extreme examples, like this is a bit of an extreme example, but one of my friends from primary school is in prison right now because of what do you call that? What do they call those? It's a crime they committed in anger. Like, it was just irrational. He was irrational, and he killed someone. Someone that he loved, but he killed them in the moment. It was just irrational action. So extreme, where your emotions And not only in the wrong direction, but they're so strong that they overpower your reason. Did Jesus do this? Did this happen in him? So he had passions. He had all the same passions in us. Did this happen to him? Why not? Nah.
Would it have?
No. Okay, so why not? Let's think about it. About why Jesus' passions. Were they disordered? Would they cloud his reason? Were they that strong? Did he react to things? If you think of the gospel, let's think of moments in the gospel where he reacts to something emotionally. What examples do you think of? The temple, he gets angry. Okay, it's an emotion, it's a real emotion. He wasn't pretending. But it was just anger. And he shows us actually that anger is okay. So there. He weeps when Lazarus dies. He's actually really liked his friend Lazarus and was really upset that he died. Yeah, there's different moments. Or at Gethsemane, we talked about. So he has passions, but they all make sense. They're all rational, and his actions are ordered. Okay, so what happens? There's this strange word that Thomas uses called pro-passions. Which sort of means, so not just like passion, just passion by itself is what we experience, where we just suffer from the stimuli. Like it comes and we react, and sometimes it's out of order. He would have what's called pro-passions, where he is in complete, his passions are never disordered and never ungoverned. I'm going to see if I can find a nice little thing from Thomas. He had perfect harmony and integration of all his faculties according to the order of reason. He wasn't inclined to sin. And then was his soul passable? So we talked about how his body is passable. It suffers nails, all these things. Some sicknesses would be undignified for him, like Jesus didn't have dementia. You know, there's some I'm just being real. Like there's some things that would be really unfitting. He couldn't accomplish his mission. It wouldn't demonstrate anything. But there's his body does suffer, but his soul does. So here, this is interesting. In him, so he does have the same sensitive appetites as us because they're part of our human nature. He has all of them, all 11 emotions. But his passions begin in the sensitive appetite, okay, same as us, but they don't hold sway over his soul. So his sensitive appetites, his, feelings, emotions, are always moved towards proper objects, okay? They don't go towards something bad. And they're always subordinate to his reason. And they don't deflect the reason or hinder it in any way. Sometimes I made a decision yesterday and I was like, I just went with my heart and I didn't go with my head, and that was a wrong decision. Oh, I'm still suffering that today. I'm like, why did I do that? I just went, yes, of course. And I'm like, that was stupid. So that's why they call him pro-passions. Like he had some kind of control that we don't have. But so he wills to allow these things to affect him. Any thoughts?
So when he says, why have you forsaken me? Is that him willing the true suffering of human nature?
Yeah, in a way.
In the same way that we might cry out for God in that way, as an example of that, or?
Yeah, so on the cross, is he in his feeling? That cry is really complicated, I think.
Yeah.
Because in part it's a psalm. And in the psalm, if you read the entire psalm, you get to the end, the last part of the psalm is all vindication.
Yeah.
So I've always read it that way of he's crying out to the Father. But the next thing he does is hand over his spirit to his Father. So he's clearly not feeling that abandoned.
No, yeah.
So it seems that he's teaching.
Because it's the same when he's in the garden, he's not
will.
my will, but your will. And then
Yeah.
the same like pattern.
Yeah,
Is that
you're
fair enough?
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so. Because just looking at his actions, he doesn't to someone abandon,
No.
but he expresses a feeling of it, like, okay, this is really hard for my human nature, but I want what you. We're one. So yeah, but feeling wise, I mean, have you ever? I was thinking about this the other day. Well, a priest one time told me, he was talking about mass. And he said, until you sort of come around the other side of the altar, not literally, he doesn't want me to be a priest. It's like, until you kind of put yourself on the other side of the altar, you don't really know what's going on in the mass. And it was a good challenge for me. I'm like, oh, yeah, like put yourself in with Christ, offering to the Father. Now, if you do that in the cross, when you meditate on the cross this week, put yourself where you're used to looking up at him. Perfect. Try to look down with him from the cross. It's a very interesting meditation. How was he looking out? What was he seeing from there? You can't really pretend you actually know, but I think it's a good exercise. From the cross looking down, what's there? Where are all of his disciples? They're gone. So there's an abandonment as well on the human level for sure. What's he hearing? All of this cursing, side. Where's his friends? His mother's there. John's there. But everyone else is angry and irrational. So I don't know. There's a feeling. There's definitely a sense of abandonment, but probably not ultimately.
No.
Some people will say, yeah, he was really abandoned by the Father. It's actually not possible because he is what he can't truly be abandoned because then he's not God. And then we're all a mess. Like, why did you do that? And you couldn't save him. Yeah. So, but raises a good question. If Jesus is on the cross and he is God, and even in his human intellect, he has the beatific vision in that moment. Which is total bliss. He's looking at the Father. How did he at the same time actually feel suffering? Okay, well, this is interesting. I think I put it here. Was there sensible pain? No. Sorrow. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, wait a minute. Fear, wonder, anger. Where is it? Here we go. Oh, is this one? Yeah, here we go. Was he a wayfarer and comprehensor? So was he still a pilgrim on the way to heaven, but then also seeing God? Yes. Before his passion, he already saw God. Like he already had the beatific vision, which is the perfect happiness of your soul. Before his passion, he was also a wayfarer. His body was mortal and passable, and his soul was also passable. While he enjoyed the beatific vision from the moment of his conception, it wasn't until after his passion he had perfect beatitude of soul and body. That's one thing. But there was another thing about his will. He willed, so was there sensible pain? He truly suffered. His hands were torn by the nail. He sensed pain in his soul. But true pain requires both the physical injury and the sense of hurt in the soul. This ability to suffer is consonant with his possession of the natural powers of the human soul. His subjection to pain is from the natural principles of human nature and not due to sin. So this is interesting. He willed to keep the divine contemplation in his mind so it didn't overflow into his sensitive powers to shut out sensible pain. So there's an actual act of will here to commit himself, to will to suffer for us, to redeem us. Because it's true, like that, the beatific vision would be bliss. But he chooses, he has to, so that's part of this pro-passion, like I choose to suffer. Thoughts? No. No?
Pro-passion.
Pro-passions? We're pro-passion here. Is that bad?
No. It's from Thomas. It's not supposed to be.
Okay, it just is what it is. But that, I think that's really interesting. Like, we run away from suffering. His nature in Gethsemane, human nature, was agonizingly, I want to go the other direction. But he chooses for our redemption to go toward it. And even on the cross, choosing the suffering. And keeping, going toward it. It's weird. There's a will in it. And if you thought about that before, it's interesting. So there's why would you do that? To redeem us. And those 3 reasons we looked at before is to be truly man, help us believe that he's truly man, to redeem us. Yeah. Interesting. But okay, so body and soul, and that was kind of it. That was all my thoughts of today. And then I put this lovely Velasquez. Oh, so good. Spanish painters in the Golden Age. Oof. Velasquez and Murillo. You have to look at Murillo. It's my favorite. Have you ever seen this prayer? No? I'll let you. Good. It's good. I like that little prayer. I can engrave it. So that was my thoughts of today. Of I think it's just really fitting for Holy Week. He's not acting. He's actually entering so far into it willingly for you. And the other thing I liked in here was talking about. Okay, there's some other interesting things. Blah blah blah. Was a sin, no frames of sin, no ignorance. His soul was passable. He had sensible pain. I love this. Was there sorrow? There was true sorrow. Okay. Christ had the ability to apprehend not only what was hurtful to himself, but also what was hurtful to others. And I think that's another thing to contemplate in the Passion of. Part of his suffering is understanding ours. Like to a way we can't understand each other's. So you have compassion. I like that. Fear, just a natural shrinking from teaching. This is actually anger. Yeah, we're done. We've done everything. So, thoughts?
What's natural shrinking?
The natural shrinking of your soul, like so your nature runs from bodily hurt. It would be really strange if he's running toward the cross. Like some people in devotion were like, oh yeah, and Christ ran to the cross like a bridegroom embracing his bride. I mean, maybe, but his nature we see in Gethsemane was like, take this away from me.
Is that a question about one of the points of that?
Yeah.
It's like when I don't even remember, but it's like when you love someone, but like you don't want to or something, or like when you have your passion and the will as well.
Yeah.
It's more.
Yeah, and people will say the opposite.
Yeah, that's what I always think was like.
Yeah.
Like with prayer and stuff.
Yeah.
Because like some of the saints have like the dark night of the soul.
Yeah.
So they don't feel like praying, but then it's more pleasing to God that they don't feel like it and they still do.
Yes. Okay.
How does that?
I think there's a little trick going on here because it's very, very, very popular idea. Oh, there's much more virtue when you don't feel it and you do it anyway. Okay. So there's virtue if you, especially prayer. Prayer is a funny journey with the Lord because he has this game with us of helping us to arrive at pure love for him, right? Where, so yes, he does strip us of the feeling of prayer, but also Jesus, like God is pure spirit, like we can't feel him anyway. So a lot of those feelings are are deceptive. They're not something to rely on. So yes, there's a purification of the senses that happens, but it's a whole integrated person. The way God made us, right, would be, well, why would we have these emotions if they're not to support the good?
Yes.
So if you do something, so for example, there's particular sins. So like envy is essentially an emotion. And envy is a sadness at the good of the other. Whereas mercy is a sadness at the misfortune of the other. So like mercy is a virtue. I actually feel bad for this person. And because of that, I do something to help them. But it involves, like, that virtue involves actually having true compassion. Jesus didn't just go, "You're all saved. Bye. See you later." Like he expressed the true feeling of it. Like he weeps over Jerusalem. Like, I want to embrace you. Like it's not stoic. And I think sometimes the problem with saying, "Oh, it's so much more virtuous when you do it, but you're feeling the opposite," is it's stoic. It's not integrated. Like an integrated person is whole and brings their whole self to it. So I think when you do an act of charity and you don't feel any love for that person, that means there's more to heal in you.
Yeah, because we can't really control it. Like it's not like we can be like, okay, I wanna feel.
I feel great about this. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can't turn it on and off. But
Yeah.
when it's not there, there's a healing that still needs to happen. Different than prayer, because prayers are so mysterious. It's just God's thing, yeah, sometimes that you've got to allow for the Lord to do that. And in everything, I guess. But the ideal is not to feel the opposite of the good that you're doing.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
So like in marriage and stuff, after you know how people after a while you
You don't feel it
So
anymore.
that's because there's a sort of healing that needs to happen.
I think eventually, yeah.
Okay.
But it doesn't mean stop loving in the meantime.
Yeah.
It's just, okay, Lord, I actually need to foster whatever brings more love. Like,
Yeah.
okay, I've been living in community for years, same people.
Yeah.
I love them, but then we get on each other's nerves. So if I find myself coming home and I'm like, yeah, hi, how are you? And I'm not interested in them. I do all the right things for them, but I'm not interested. I need to foster love.
Right.
I need to do stuff. I need to ponder the goodness of that person. I need to be creative and playing jokes on them or something. Like you got to do something to keep the love increasing. But it's true that you don't always feel it. But I can help that, or I could foster the opposite. Anyway, yeah, that makes sense. Sort of makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just think there's a bit of a danger in being stoic. Yeah. Any other thoughts? No. It's a lot of stuff. So we'll take it away and into Holy Week. I think it's beautiful. But yeah, try and do that thing of look with him down. St. John of the Cross has a beautiful sketch he did of from Jesus looking down on the world. That was a contemplation that he did. He drew a little sketch of that. It's a good, I think it's a good, if you've never done that before, try it. I mean, you also always have to have the humility of, as if I know what's in the mind of Jesus, but I'm trying to love him more by trying to see with his eyes. I remember I had a couple of years where that was my meditation for a couple of years. It was I go back to that because it changed me. It changed, like, what is his disposition? He is pouring himself out for everyone, for the people who are jeering at him, people who are hating him. Like he's he's on the cross, but it helped me get on my knees before people. Of how can I serve you? Like, how do I? Like, what else? You know. But I want so much your salvation. I want your good so much. Whatever. You know, it's really beautiful. He's not sitting there judging the world harshly. He's there. Anything else I can do? No. So it's a good meditation. All right, people. That is the
Thank
end.
you.
Thank you very much. Have a wonderful Holy Week. Yes, we will try and do our best. I want to start recording.